Goodbye. Hello, Heisman.
20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. All the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. No, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
Welcome in, everybody, to another preview here on the Three Technique, a college football podcast at the intersection of the X's and O's and the Jimmies and the Joes. I'm Mitch Mason, joined by Trey Reeves tonight. Trey, we have finished the Big Ten. We are into SEC country for the first of what will be three more previews here. And, man, I'm excited about it. We've had just so much excellent football come out of the SEC. Now we've got Texas and Oklahoma joining the conference. There are so many storylines, and I feel like the pecking order of the SEC is the conference that I'm most curious to know about at the end of this season.
Yeah, and it's a conference where you can rocket up the pecking order or fall way, way down the pecking order very, very quickly. And it seems like there's always a surprise team that does both of those things. I think we're going to talk about maybe one that could surprise on the bottom on this episode that our fans might be foreshadowing there. But yeah, we're recording this the day after the end of SEC Media Days. And I don't know about you, but SEC Media Days always gets me fired up for the start of college football season. The spectacle, the pageantry that they always put on, it just means more. They say it on the commercials, and they really shows when they put on an event like that. And it gets me fired up. It's the unofficial start to football season every year for me.
I agree. No other point, literally no other sport am I sitting there watching, Arkansas's coach at the podium, wondering what he's going to say. And boy, Sam Pittman did not disappoint us with some quotable lines. I'm sure we'll talk about that.
Talked like a man that did not care about the future.
Talked like a man who is excited to get that buyout at the end, or maybe in the middle of this season. Who knows? We'll see. If you are new around here, first of all, welcome. Glad to have you a part of the Jimmies and the Joes. If you would hit like, subscribe on whatever platform you're finding us on, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, the list goes on. We're glad to have you here. Our social handles are all at 3TechPod, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. So head on over to the other ones and drop us a follow. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers on both YouTube and Twitter. We'd love to hit those marks before the season starts, if possible. And that is obviously thanks to viewers like you. And if you didn't listen to the Big Ten previews, we would encourage you to do that. But the way that we got this power ranking order that we're going to do in reverse order was by sending out surveys to our listeners who filled it out. A chance to win a Home Field Apparel gift card, which, by the way, this episode, all of our episodes brought to you by the good folks over at the Good Brand, 3TechPod. Gets you 15% off over on their website, so go check them out. But the listeners put together this preview list, and so we're diving into the people's choices. Number 16, I don't think is going to surprise anybody in the SEC after that.
Alabama.
I don't think they're going to drop that far. But after that, the roller coaster ride is one that's provided by the listeners, which is so much fun. It's really brought a little spice, a little zest, I think, to our preview season this year. So, Trey, without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. Number 16, unfortunately, in the Southeastern Conference, will once again be the Vanderbilt Commodores. They were 2-10 a season ago. They were 0-8 in conference play. Trey, may I remind you, at SEC Media Days just 2 seasons ago, Clark Lea said that Vanderbilt was on the path to becoming the best football team in the nation. Maybe a minor setback for a major comeback. I don't know how you would choose to interpret 2022 or 2023 rather, but it seems like if they get anybody who is really good on the football side since Derek Mason left, they're exiting via the transfer portal or other means, looking for better opportunities as this team has not been very athletic. They have not been able to supplement the stars that they have tried to build around. and they've just been the cupcake within the SEC schedule on a week in, week out basis.
Yeah, and I mean, every conference has teams like this, and Vanderbilt has been for the large majority of its existence towards the bottom of the SEC. And I admire Clark Lea's optimism when he first took that job, but it is a very tough place to win. Probably one of the top 5 toughest places to win in all of college football when you factor in the level of competition. I will say, I think the offense is going to be surprisingly exciting at Vanderbilt this year. I'm intrigued by the transfer additions. We've got Diego Pavia bringing his talents from Las Cruces, lit the world on fire. You may remember him going viral for the touchdown where his helmet was thrown around backwards last year in week 0. And the homeless man's Johnny Manziel is what we started calling him on this podcast. Or at least I called him that. But yeah, I think that's a fun addition. Nate Johnson from Utah got a couple fun wide receivers. Defense picked up a couple guys, but really defensively, I just don't know how they're going to stop some of these high-powered offenses that are on the schedule. I think they'll put up points, and I think that they'll have some exciting games, especially on the offensive side of the ball. They might jump up and get somebody. They were 5-7 2 years ago and beat a couple, like I can't remember their conference record, but they were 5-7, won a couple games against Kentucky and Florida down the stretch. So they have the ability to jump up and get somebody. It didn't happen for them last year, but the defense is just going to continue to hold them back. I don't see it taking a big enough improvement to really challenge for anything of significance.
Yeah, 103rd scoring offense a season ago, 22.8 points a game. Their scoring defense, 129th. They were giving up over 35 points a game. And like you said, there's not really a reason to believe that the defense is going to be a heck of a lot better. They've got Micah Bell that comes in from Notre Dame to bolster the secondary, starting safety, and Mo Hampton transfers over from Memphis. But Vanderbilt football is just kind of, I think, the poster child in the SEC for the athletes that go pro in something other than sports. Just, it has not been
a lot of Big Four accountants, a lot of high stakes guys on Wall Street, lots of doctors, people we need in our society, just not professional.
Yeah. Investment bankers are just, ripe at Vanderbilt. I think law students as well. But it's tough to look at a team last year that gave up at least 31 points in every single loss and then lost their talent, right? Nate Shepard, their best wide receiver, he's gone at Colorado. Nate Clifton was without a doubt their best defensive lineman. He's gone to USC. There's just not a lot that's encouraging me that they're going to take this big step forward. Clark Lee, God bless him. He certainly put the heart, the soul, the sweat, the tears into it, but he's 9-27 at the school since taking over. I don't know that that's his fault necessarily. Derek Mason was a little bit of an aberration when he got to 8-9 wins at Vanderbilt. He was recruiting really well at one point there. I mean, Vanderbilt used to be, at least for a little bit, they were a plucky bowl team. They were 6-7 wins.
James Franklin had some really good years.
Exactly. Had some really good seasons there. But those seasons are a far, far thing of the past. So looking at their schedule, and I got to pull it up. I accidentally had Georgia's schedule up.
I got it right here if you need it.
It's a tough first 4 games. And when I was putting together this written preview, I think I highlighted the first 4 games because they've got to go 2-2. Virginia Tech and Missouri feel like instant losses. Maybe they can pull an upset over Virginia Tech. It is at home. You get Alcorn State and Georgia State after that. But after that, man, the SEC opponents are Alabama at Kentucky, Texas at Auburn, South Carolina at LSU, and Tennessee. Just if there's room for growth and expected improvement here, someone's got to show it to me because I'm just not there.
Yeah, over-under's 2.5. I could see them hitting that over by winning the non-conference games other than Virginia Tech, but yeah, you're right. On paper, there's not a conference win on this schedule. South Carolina at home is maybe the one you circle if you're looking for an upset opportunity, but even that one, I'm sure they're going to be heavy underdogs to the Gamecocks. So they really don't do themselves any favors either with the scheduling. I'm sure it's not hard. It's not easy to get big or even small G5 teams to come to Nashville for a one-off game, but at Georgia State, why are we playing that game in Atlanta? Like, what they put at UNLV last year, I remember
Yeah.
too, lost that game in Vegas to a talented Rebels squad. So what are we doing, Vanderbilt athletic department? Like,
Trying to cement some new inroads into new recruiting territory, I
get in
think.
the hole. Yeah, you're not gonna. I don't think the Vegas pipeline is flowing from that loss at Allegiant Stadium last year.
I don't think so. So yeah, Vandy, like Trey mentioned, 2-10, the over under. Yeah, you could get to 3. That's the betting favorite by a landslide. They were minus 185 odds to hit that over. So, I mean, if they're just a diehard Commodore fan and want to anchor down, throw some shekels on it and maybe feel good about yourself at the end of the year. But otherwise, I don't know that Vandy's going to do a ton in 2024.
And you'll feel amazing that you get that SEC media rights check, because that will come in the mail no matter how many games you lose.
It's true. Till we go to a relegation system. Congratulations, Vanderbilt. Yeah, this last season, 2023, was one of like historically their worst athletic calendars as an entire program.
Baseball didn't save them.
Baseball didn't save them. Basketball was atrocious. So yeah, just hang on, Vandy fans. You're going pro in something other than sports. Number 15, Mississippi State Bulldogs. And, for a team that is down at the very bottom of a conference power ranking, I think there's some future optimism. I think it's far future, but there is a lot of reason to be optimistic about what's going on in Starkville. Jeff Lebby comes to town after whatever it was that Zach Arnett tried to instill there. Obviously, after the passing of Mike Leach, Arnett just wasn't a fit, I don't think, to run that offense at all. He's a defensive-minded guy. He ends up turning Will Rogers into the check down merchant, and they go 5-7, 1-7 in conference. They got blown out at Texas A&M. Jimbo Fisher's infamous last game before he was dismissed. So, yeah, just a painful year for Mississippi State fans, but a lot of reason to believe that the offense is going to be at least more exciting, up-tempo, a lot more creativity. Lebby's an offensive guy. But will the results follow in year one? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, it's always difficult when you're a first-year head coach or a first-time head coach at a program of the caliber of Mississippi State in the SEC, right? It's a hard place to learn. It's a hard place to win, even if you're an experienced coach, but let alone it being your first time ever as a head coach. So it'll be fascinating to see how he adjusts. Blake Shapen is certainly one of the quarterbacks in the SEC. And
he's a guy.
I don't mean to poo-poo on him. I feel like we've given him a hard time on this podcast over the years, but he's a guy that was, if you're not familiar with him, if you're an SEC fan tuning into this, you're not familiar with Blake Shapen's origin story. He was given the keys to the kingdom at Baylor, given the keys to a conference championship winning team. And he's one of the main reasons that Dave Aranda is on the hot seat going into this year, because Dave hitched his wagon to Shapen, and that wagon careened off a cliff very quickly into the Brazos. So it's going to be interesting. The offense, Jeff Lebby is a fantastic offensive mind. You see the offenses at Oklahoma. You've seen him throughout his entire career. All the stops he's been at before that, he has put great offenses on the field. Whether or not he has a talent to do that in his first year here in Starkville with the defenses that he's going to be going up against, that remains to be seen. And, Mississippi State's kind of had a sneaky good defense the last couple of years, better than you would think, especially with a team running the air raid. So Coleman Hunter comes in, Coleman Hudsier comes in. He doesn't really have a ton of experience outside of being the co-DC at Texas a few years ago. So a lot of new on the coaching staff, and they're picked towards the bottom of the conference for a reason. There's so much new. They lost their top 5 pass catchers from last year, I believe. So switching offensive systems, it's going to take some time. There's going to be some growing pains. And just like with any brand new head coach, we have no idea how he's going to run his program. We have no idea. Is the moment going to be too big for him? There's time and time again, it just seems like such a 50-50 shot at best when you have a coordinator getting promoted to a big time head coaching spot, because sometimes even the ones like I mentioned Dave Aranda a while back, like we thought, hey, this is, if there's ever going to be a coordinator that makes the jump and makes it look easy, it's going to be Dave Aranda. He's on the hot seat within 4 years in Waco. Yeah. So we don't know. Like that's a long-winded way of saying we don't know. The schedule for the Bulldogs this year is absolutely brutal. The SEC office did Lebby and company no favors. They get Eastern Kentucky at Arizona State, Toledo to start the year, but then conference play starts with Florida, at Texas, at Georgia, Texas A&M at home. Like that I don't know that there's going to be a tougher 4-pack to start a conference play this year than that.
Lebby got a question in Dallas at SEC Media Days if he pissed off somebody in the league office, and that was his reward to start his SEC tenure. A tough break for Mississippi State. Now, I will say, Lebby came in and he was able to convince or recruit some decent offensive talent to Starkville. So they've got a lot of young 4-stars on this offensive side, specifically the wide receiver spot that, like I say, there's reason to be optimistic. I just don't know that it's going to happen in year one. You know, quite honestly, part of the rationale for why we're a little bit lower on Oklahoma, and we'll get to the Sooners in a future episode. They're not in this one. But part of the reason why we're lower on the Sooners isn't necessarily because of the talent. It's because of the meat grinder schedule that they have to go through. And I think Mississippi State is certainly in that camp as well, where, yeah, I like some pieces on this offense. The defense has always been stubborn, always been tough-nosed. But like you've been saying, so much new. I don't know that the quarterback is a real difference maker. You know, he hadn't been healthy throughout his career either. Like, aside from, you know, whether or not you think he's an incredible game manager or accurate passer, he just hadn't been healthy. And so that's an entirely new challenge that he's got to stay on the field as well. Will Rogers is quarterback in the Washington offense. So, you know, we'll let the dust settle, I think, in 2024. Take your lumps if you're Mississippi State. The over-under is at 4.5. That feels about right. You know, it seems like it would be a stretch to get to a bowl game, but maybe you catch fire. And, you know, we've seen weird things happen in Stark Vegas before. They can be a tough team to beat on the road as well. So, again, ingredients, I think they're coming together, but not 2024.
No, it's going to be a couple of years, I think, to fully rebuild. It's a program that lost a sitting head coach and just in a tragic way less than 2 years ago. Like that is something that very few programs can recover from quickly. It's going to take a little bit for Mississippi State to fully rebound. And, you know, you don't want to fully pin it on the guy that's not there anymore, but it just the way that transition was handled last year, trying to switch the whole offense, trying to just change the entire vision of the program, it really set the Bulldogs back, and it's going to set Lebby back at least one season, I think.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier, Coleman Hutzler is now the defensive coordinator there. Only real experience at this level was in the 2020 season when he was the co-DC at Texas. They had the 41st scoring defense a season ago, so at the very least, you need their defense to step up to improve if you're going to make a bowl game this year. So I think a lot of eyes will be on Hutzler this season. Number 14, the Arkansas Razorbacks. Trey, you mentioned it. It kind of felt like Sam Pittman was a guy who has some fall plans to be in Cabo when he got up on the stage in Dallas. You know, this has been such a weird ride for Hog fans because, boy, there was a time when it felt like Arkansas was going to be the next Ole Miss, right? They were going to be the next team that was right there on the door of maybe sliding into Atlanta one year, getting a couple of crazy bounces, pulling off an upset. And just like that, you're competing for a conference championship and a playoff berth. We've gone from that being a very real possibility to now Arkansas went 4-8 last year, 1-7 in conference play. This year, I've heard more Hogs fans that I know either dismiss or talk disparagingly about football season than I ever have in my entire life. And this is for non-SEC fans. The Arkansas fan base is one of the most typically optimistic fan bases. They talk themselves into an 8, 9 win season every single year, and then typically end up falling short. To hear them already feel like the air is out of the balloon this season before we've even played a snap is very weird to me.
Yeah, I think that's how you know it's going to be a tough season up in Fayetteville, because you're right. Most years it's Frank Broyles or the heights of Petrino are still the head coach there, and everything's right in the world, right? Petrino's back this year, so maybe they can recapture. That's the most fascinating storyline to me. I know that Pittman's on the hot seat, but I can't think of another time that a former head coach returned to his former school. Obviously, there's the drama of how he left Arkansas the first time. We don't have to rehash that on this show, but just the fact that he is back as an offensive coordinator. I can't remember another time that happening.
Certainly not in the circumstances with which he left the first time. But you know what?
He's a great offensive mind. I think he's going to be a huge upgrade from I can't remember their offensive coordinator last year. It was like one of those names that's always out there, but is good, but can't. I'll Google it in a second. But I really think that he's going to be an upgrade. You had an offensive system last year that tried to make KJ Jefferson into a pocket passer. You get a guy in KJ Jefferson's gone, but you get a guy in Taylon Green from Boise who is, a very intriguing prospect, not lighting the world on fire at Boise, but putting up some nice numbers and leading Boise to success in the Mountain West. So I'm interested to see what he can do with the keys to this, but they are losing a ton of production from last year. They're losing top rushers. KJ was their top rusher, obviously, but AJ Green's gone. Rocket Sanders is gone. Lots of receiving talent back, but they didn't really have a game-breaking wide receiver last year. Andrew Armstrong led him last year with about 700 yards. So there's a lot of pieces, but I'm not necessarily optimistic that they are making the right final picture of the puzzle, if that makes sense. Like that was ultimately clear last year, that there were a ton of great pieces on offense.
Yeah.
Whoever was putting the puzzle together could not put it together and fit the right pieces in the right place. Maybe Bobby Petrino can do that. Maybe this time around it gets the offense going. But again, this is another team that just drew the short end of the stick on the scheduling metric too.
Yeah, I think what I'm encouraged about with Arkansas is Petrino's very familiar with Taylon Green. Green was received his first collegiate offer from Petrino when he was at Missouri State. So there's a real love between them. Petrino handpicked Taylon Green out of the portal when Green entered from Boise State. So there's a lot of trust, a lot of loyalty. And from everything that I've read, Taylon's looked really good in the workouts in spring game. He does look like he can take over the quarterback position. For me, like you said, what are the weapons offensively that he's going to be able to rely on week in, week out? Defensively, you lost so much in the pass rush. The linebacker core was just decimated. I know you get like Anton Junage from Albany. You get Xavier Sori Jr. From Georgia. You've got really talented newcomers coming in, but is it maybe a little too late for the Sam Pittman administration? Potentially. You mentioned that schedule. 5.5 is their over/under. It's probably a 2-2 start, I think, with Arkansas Pine Bluff at Oklahoma State, UAB that is going to be just abysmal on defense this year, and then at Auburn. I don't know how that game goes. Auburn's going to be better this year, but probably a 2-2 start. And then you get Texas A&M, which typically is the swing game for one of these two teams, right? I mean, Texas A&M only lost their first Southwest Classic to Arkansas. What was it, 3 years ago now?
2021, yeah.
Yeah, 3 years ago. And that year, Arkansas, boy, they felt like it was full steam ahead. It was their time to shine. After they lost in the way that they did the last 2 seasons, it's really felt like it's taken them some time to recover. And starting out 2-3 with Tennessee and LSU sandwiching a bye week. We talked about it at some point during the cold, dark days of the offseason. Does Sam Pittman survive the midseason bye week, October 12th? If that was the over-under of Sam Pittman being employed at Arkansas, what would you take?
I'd take the under. I would take the under because I think it's going to be a rough start. That game in Stillwater isn't easy. I think Auburn is going to be an objectively better team than Arkansas this year, and it's in Auburn, and they just haven't had success against A&M or teams the caliber of Tennessee consistently. And really, if you look at Sam Pittman's tenure, it's interesting. I'm looking at their previous results right now. If they could just avoid the long losing streak.
Yes.
What would our opinion of Sam Pittman be, and would he be on the hot seat? Because he is, a guy that lost 4 games in a row in 2020, 3 games in a row in 21, 3 games in a row and 2 games in a row in 22, and then obviously lost, 6 in a row last year in October and November. So if he could just avoid those long losing streaks, he's fine. But I think you see right here in the middle of the schedule, it's setting up another gauntlet that he has to run through.
Well, and after that bye week is not anything better. LSU at Mississippi State. You get Ole Miss right after the Bulldogs as well, and then Texas and Missouri are your last 2 SEC teams. I mean, truly, to pick out a path to bowl eligibility for Arkansas, I think would take a minor miracle this year, with all the offenses, again, especially that they're going to have to draw. And the flip side of that is Auburn's defense should be a lot better this year. The Aggies are, Mike Elko said this is one of the best defenses on paper he's ever had. Tennessee, LSU, Ole Miss is starting to play defense. Missouri at Faro Field to end the season when Missouri might have a playoff berth on the line. It's tough to talk yourself into Arkansas doing much this year, and not to, it's easy to feel like we're just kind of browbeating these teams at the bottom of the power rankings, but
that's the reality of life in the SEC.
It is
if you're not at the top, it is a very tough living. There's a reason that so many coaches in this conference get fired every single year, because there's high expectations and not always the talent to back up those expectations when you compare it to the top end of the conference.
Yeah, I agree. I'm hopeful that Arkansas's future post Sam Pittman, because I think it's a foregone conclusion he's getting fired at the end of or at some point during the season. I do hope that they're not a cellar dweller in the SEC. Arkansas is objectively a fun school, a fun program. Of course, I'm going to root against them when they play my team, but I think there's a lot of fun to like about Arkansas athletics. They're a passionate fan base, a loyal fan base. It's tough when you see, I think, a fan base so wrapped up in their athletic program just take it on the chin year after year. Hog fans love their football, and I'd like for them to get a piece of the pie every once in a while, but probably not this season. Number 13, South Carolina. The Gamecocks are a fascinating story and a team this year that could have a much higher ceiling, a la 2022, or they could have a much lower floor, a la 2023. With Shane Beamer in power, it really felt like the hype around South Carolina was a little bit of a house of cards last year, did it not? I mean, all the hype around the recruits and the momentum and back-to-back upsets over Clemson and Tennessee, it just didn't feel like the roster was solidified enough to take that momentum for 2022 and carry it into 2023. Sure enough, they didn't. 5-7, they miss a bowl game. They go 3-5 in conference play. But this year, that talented roster takes a step forward. They do continue to lose some big pieces in the portal, but Shane Beamer's been recruiting well. They've got a new quarterback in Lenore Sellers who's taken over. Love, or a Rex Specs guy under center. And I think the defense should be the driving factor for the Gamecocks this season.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think the defense is going to definitely be the more experienced unit for sure. They bring back, 4 or 5 of their top tacklers from last year, ton of experience on that side of the ball. And the defense has been decent in Shane Beamer's tenure. So I'm interested to see if they can take another step forward this year. The offense, it really scares me, though. The offense with Sellers running the show. They brought in Robbie Ashford to kind of be a competitive, I guess, to compete for the starting job. But, we've seen a lot of Robbie Ashford at Auburn. I don't know that he's a program-saving quarterback. He can maybe come in and spell you for a little bit if there's an injury, or drive the bus if there's a lot of talent around him. But we've seen him with comparable talent to what South Carolina has. And it hasn't looked great throughout his career at Auburn. So it's really Sellers or bust for me. And he threw 4 passes last year, 3-star recruit a couple of years ago. So this is one of Beamer's guys. This is, the guy that he has highlighted and pinpointed as the guy to take him into the future and be the quarterback of the future. But it's going to be really interesting to see how he fares. One thing I will say about South Carolina, though, especially under Shane Beamer, they close seasons really, really well. And I know they went 5-7 last year, but they were 3-1 down the stretch. They had another team that had a long losing streak, lost 4 in a row in the middle of the year, then closed with 3-1, and they were within 1 score of Clemson and go into a 3rd straight bowl game. So, Beamer, not a lot of people are talking about him on the hot seat, especially not in the level of Sam Pittman, and we'll get to Billy Napier in a second. But I think Beamer, if he misses a bowl game another year, has got to really start sweating his future in South Carolina. And there's going to be a lot of questions asked on if he just kind of pulled some stuff out of his where the first couple of years there, and if there's any sustainability here. But you're right. You're back to this year and just kind of zooming in on this team. I do think the defense is going to be above expectations. Again, bring a ton of talent back, bring a lot. They run that 3-3-5. They really didn't get comfortable in that until the end of the year. And you saw what happened at the end of the year when they finally got comfortable. They're holding, it's not the best competition, but holding Jacksonville State below their season average. Vanderbilt, they held to 6 points. Kentucky, they held to 14, held Clemson to 15 when they finally got comfortable in that system. So maybe that carries over to this year. And if they're really ready to go, they come out firing. You could see them, I don't know, Kentucky is their first conference game, LSU at home. Maybe they could fire off a couple of wins to start the year and kind of rewrite the narrative.
Boy, if they could beat LSU at home, that would be massive. That would get the juice, I think, flowing nationwide. It may still be optimistic in Columbia, South Carolina. I don't know. I obviously did the research for this preview. It seemed like their beat writers were more optimistic coming into this season than I would have originally thought. Certainly not the hype that they had last season, but given the 5-7 nature, the way that they closed that season, they were more optimistic than I expected them to be. A couple of pieces that I really like on both sides of the ball. Brady Hunt is an all-world tight end coming over from the MAC. He's over from Ball State. If you haven't heard his name, definitely get to know that name. He was wanted by a lot of SEC programs, Big Ten programs. When he entered the portal, was rumored that he was committing to Texas A&M and joining that loaded tight end room, and then ended up, or I guess he was committed to South Carolina, almost flipped to A&M, and then ended up staying with South Carolina. But was one of the best players in the MAC over the last 2 seasons. So I love the addition of Brady Hunt. Rocket Sanders is now a Gamecock. He leaves the Hogs for South Carolina. He's really going to stay healthy. If he does, I think he's an excellent option as the bell cow, kind of the straw that stirs that offensive drink. And then defensively, they get 2 really talented pass rushers, and DeAndre Jules. Kyle Kennard comes over from Georgia Tech. So, you mentioned the 3-3-5, getting more comfortable in it, being able to apply pressure to the passer by mixing up your looks, by not always having to send 4 or 5 to get to the quarterback. That's important this year. And against that schedule where the over-under is 5.5, America right now, will say, taking the over on this, which I'm a little stunned about. But you mentioned the SEC schedule: Kentucky, LSU, Ole Miss, at Alabama, at Oklahoma, bye week, Texas A&M, at Vanderbilt, Missouri, off week against Wofford, and then at Clemson. If you are going to get South Carolina to a bowl game this season, it means that you're taking them probably to knock off Kentucky on the road in week 2, and then beating 2 of Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Missouri, and or Clemson. That's a bridge too far for me.
And maybe LSU at home. Like
And maybe
I can
LSU at
see,
home.
yeah, I would probably I would probably say it's more likely to beat LSU at home versus Oklahoma on the road if it's just me. But yeah, the home games, they do have 4 of their tougher games at home, and that's the bright spot for South Carolina. LSU, Ole Miss, A&M, and Missouri are all at home. Of course, they go to Alabama and Oklahoma.
Yeah,
but
I was going to say that's with it. Yeah.
But having those other 4 games at home could help them out.
We'll see if South Carolina can make a bowl game. I think if they did again, that would get, even though the record wouldn't be sexy, the way that they got to 6-6, I think would.
It would get people fired up again.
Exactly.
Yep.
And just like that, you have South Carolina as a 10-win team, projected in 2025. That's how we roll here in the SEC, right? Number 12, the Florida Gators, maybe the most interesting team in the entire conference this season. The Gators have objectively one of the most talented rosters in the entire country, and yet they also went 5-7 a season ago, 3-5 in conference play. Trey, the calls for Sunbelt Billy's job continue to grow louder by the day. Billy Napier did an excellent job at Louisiana, but since coming to Florida, he really has underperformed the vast majority of his contract so far. At SEC Media Days, when he was asked about those underwhelming results, he said, "We are right on schedule." That didn't seem to go over well with the fan base or the SEC media in general, saying missing a bowl game in your third year? How long has he been there?
Yeah, second year.
With a roster loaded with blue chippers. That's a little bit of a tough scene. Now, we have to start with the hardest schedule maybe concocted ever in college football. Their schedule, and I quote, starts with number 24, Miami at home, Samford Bulldogs. Number 25, Texas A&M, at Mississippi State, bye week, UCF, at number 16, Tennessee, home against number 23, Kentucky, bye week, home against number 1, Georgia, at number 4, Texas, home against number 12, LSU, home against number 6, Ole Miss, at number 15, Florida State.
And a partridge in a pear tree.
Woof. And our friends over at FBS Schedules did them the kindness of listing the SEC championship underneath that FSU game. I don't think they're going to be anywhere near that. But Trey, that schedule is comical. It's like we built it in NCAA 14 or college football 25. It's something straight out of a video game. Can Florida's talent make some hay against that schedule, even though everybody in the country is seemingly selling Florida right now?
Yeah, their talent is there. Absolutely. They have one of the most talented rosters in the country. And if you listen to Greg McElroy at SEC Media Days, he was beating that drum rather loudly the whole time that Florida was on the podium. So, yes, they have the talent, but the coaching has certainly left a lot to be desired. Yeah. And I would say their 2 most exciting offensive skill player positions last year, and Trevor Etienne and Ricky Pearsall, are now no longer on the roster. So what you had to look forward to on the offensive side of the ball, I know Graham Mertz is back, and there's a very loud vocal contingent of Graham Mertz supporters out there. Count me as not one of them. I'm just not impressed with what I've seen. It's a lot of checkdowns. No, the average depth of target statistics on Graham Mertz are shockingly low. Like should not be relevant for an SEC starting quarterback.
All of their passing yardage came 10 yards or shorter from the line of scrimmage. As soon as you go pass plays 20 plus, 30 plus, 40 plus yards downfield, Florida is 100 plus in passing yards statistically. One of the worst offenses at chunk passing plays. So, I think, did he turn the ball over a ton last year? No. Was his completion percentage sky high? Absolutely it was. He doesn't make a lot of poor decisions, but he doesn't, whether it's him or the offense that he's in, there's not a lot of game-breaking plays, a lot of reasons to choose Florida to win a game, to drive down the field late because of Graham Mertz, in my opinion, and sounds like yours as well.
Yeah, I'm not going to have him. If you gave me all the SEC quarterbacks and said, who do you want to lead a game-winning drive, he's probably not going to be in my top 10 picks, honestly. Like, he's a talented quarterback. He can show flashes, but whether it's scheme or whether it's just not being as good as he's hyped up to be by some, he's just not the guy when the rubber meets the road. And you see that in the close game record, right? Like, you see that he did not pull out any of those close games. And that's what a lot of people point to with Florida, is they lost so many close games last year.
Yeah.
And that's fair. And it tends to even itself out over the course of years. But there's also a ton of examples of when you can't win the close games over multiple years. That's not bad luck. That's just a trend in bad coaching or bad scheme or players that just can't get it done. So, they brought in 30 new scholarship players. It's a total clean house from last year. And typically that tells me that the coach is on his last leg. When it's new coordinators, new defensive coordinator. I know the defensive coordinator was hired away by A&M, but a new defensive coordinator, a ton of new players, trying to completely start a clean slate. That shows me that there is a lot of panicking in the room. So it's not good. Like the talent is there, but it's against the number one schedule. You have a coach that hasn't shown you that he can win close games against talented teams with even talent. And it's difficult for me to predict a very successful season for Florida at this point. I know you said your crucial stretch is the end, Georgia through Florida State. That's certainly the toughest stretch, because that November, that might be the toughest month of college football that any team has ever faced right there. Georgia at Texas, LSU, Ole Miss at Florida State. Ridiculous. And if you pick them to go 0-5 in that stretch right now, I don't think anyone would blame you in a vacuum. If they're going to make a bowl game, they have to start 5-0. Yeah. Like, full stop. They have to start 5-0. If they lose to Miami week 1, you can forget about them making a bowl game. I'm going to say that right now. Like, I think it legitimately, like, that's not overreacting. I think that if they lose to Miami, and especially if they also lose to Texas A&M, it's over. Pack it up. 1, 2, 3, Cancun. Napier is another one that might not make it through the bye week after Mississippi State.
Yeah, the prospects of that Florida team starting 1-2, like thinking about what the message boards would be like Saturday night if they lost to Texas A&M at home. They start 0-2 in games that matter, and just have the Samford Bulldogs as their win. Like, that's a dark place for, again, a roster that is super talented. I mean, they bring in the high school recruiting has been doing so well. I know that Billy didn't hang on to all the 4 and 5 stars that he originally had committed in that class last year. But man, landing DJ Lagway, 5-star quarterback, Gatorade Player of the Year from the state of Texas was incredible. Everybody wanted him on their team. Florida got him. You got transfers in Chimeri Dyke, Elijah Badger, 2 really exciting wide receivers to help replace the production from Ricky Pearsall. You upgrade on both lines of scrimmage through the portal, through high school recruiting as well. Grayson Pop Howard comes in. I mean, the list goes on and on for why.
We heard about upgrades last year through the portal too.
I know we did. I'm trying to give Florida fans some reason to keep going with this preview, to keep fighting the good fight. Because at the end of the day, like, yeah, they know the schedule's hard, right? They've been told that all off season. They've probably been waking up in cold sweats thinking about that schedule. But to just play devil's advocate, if they were to make some hay against that schedule, to start 4-1, 5-0, it's got to be the defense. The offense is going to do whatever the offense is going to do. But last year, outside of games at the Swamp, which they did not play an impressive home schedule last year, they upset Tennessee. We called that on this show. That was their best showing of the season. They gave up 37 points per game outside of the Swamp. At home, it was just over 17 points a game. Overall, season totals, they were one of the worst defenses in the Southeastern Conference, bottom half in almost every statistical category. That cannot happen this season if they are going to even approach a bowl game. The talent's there. Maybe the new scheme and coaching staff are in place to do that. But if they're going to get to a bowl game or somewhere close, that's the key. That's how they're going to get it done. It's got to be the defense turning games into rock fights, quite honestly.
Yeah, and they've got to have a huge step forward. New coaching staff on that side of the ball, so new optimism, but you got to see it before you believe it. They also lost a ton of their most talented players to the portal, like Scooby Williams and Jaden Hill leaving for A&M, and I'm not optimistic. So many times you try to point to places that with these dead men walking and find the optimism and think that they can bring it back, but how often do they actually bring it back and get it back on track? Like Jim Harbaugh is maybe the only one in the modern era, and that's what every school is going to point to for optimism, but Jim Harbaughs are rare.
That's true. I swear every team so far is going to think we absolutely hate their teams. It's not true. It's just like
this is a depressing episode. This is maybe the most depressing.
It is a little bit, yeah. It is a little bit.
A&M lost to App State.
That's right. It gets better from here. I promise you. So if you're new, stick around. Give us another chance. It'll be a lighter episode next time. I guarantee it. We get to talk about teams like Auburn and Oklahoma. And
go back and listen to me
Tennessee.
typing up the Vandy offense, and then you'll be ready to go.
That's right. I mean, do you want smoke, blown up your butt, or do you want the facts? We're gonna give you the facts. Let's end the episode with Kentucky, and Kentucky fans are going, "Oh my gosh, oh no,
you're next."
Do we dare? It's the Grim Reaper meme knocking on all the doors. Kentucky's the final door. No, Kentucky finished 7-6 last year, 3-5 in conference play. It felt like it was going to be kind of what we've come to expect from Mark Stoops, where they roar out to a 5-0 start. The defense is humming along. The offense seems like, okay, we've got an identity through the ground. Devin Leary occasionally connected with one of his wide receivers. So, it wasn't the most convincing 5-0, but boy, you just smashed Florida into the ground. Like, you felt good. And then you got dog walked by Georgia, and it all fell apart after that. You won 2 of your next 8 games. And yeah, it didn't finish great, including a loss in the Gator Bowl against Clemson. So, it's a changing of the guard at quarterback. You've got Brock Vandagriff, who comes over from Georgia, former 5-star, who finally gets his chance. He's out there in Bluegrass Nation, wearing the cell phone on the outside of his belt buckle. I mean, he's fitting right in. They get Bo Allen that comes in from Georgia State. Gavin Wimstad comes in from Rutgers. So it's, just kind of a who's who of like second tier quarterbacks, I feel like. And then Vandagriff could be the crown jewel. You got Jamori Macklin, who comes in from UNT. He's going to be a fun piece to see in a big time offense. Was, I think, the leading wide receiver at North Texas last year in a top 5 offense led there by Eric Morris. He's now at Kentucky. Chip Trayanum is the running back there, coming over from Ohio State. Decided not to play third fiddle to Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. So, you look around this team, and it's a very talented roster. Mark Stoops' defense always seems to be plucky, especially when they play at home. I think what I'm a little concerned about is what is Kentucky's identity. That's what I need to find out this season. That's my key storyline for the Wildcats, because they're replacing several critical pieces on both sides of the ball. Offense was painfully average last year. Again, it looked like they were going to really find an identity on the ground. And then you get to the end of the season and it's 85th passing, 93rd rushing. So the rushing attack really regressed. And the defense statistically took a step back. Still a good defense, 45th in total defense, but a step back from what it had been. They've got a lot of intriguing pieces on that defense, but I need to see what this Kentucky team is going to be known for, especially with their schedule. It's a tough trifecta to start the SEC. You get South Carolina week 2, Georgia week 3 at home, and then after a game against Ohio, you go to Ole Miss. Maybe some breaks, if you can call them that, in the middle of the schedule. Vanderbilt at Florida, Auburn at Tennessee, and then you finish with Murray State at Texas and the Commonwealth Cup. Commonwealth Cup, is that what it's
Yeah.
called? Yeah,
Yep.
Commonwealth Cup against Louisville. So again, another one of these kind of middle of the SEC teams that certainly could take a step up. I don't think we would be just shocked if Kentucky was an 8-win team, maybe a magical defense, and they're suddenly a 9-win ball club. But again, with that schedule, I think for a lot of these teams, it's just hard to go, yes, Sharpie, give it a click. There's a win on the schedule. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And on the identity front, they bring in Bush Hamdan as the offensive coordinator. The best Kentucky teams have had a ground and pound attack, dual threat quarterback that passes when he absolutely has to, but is a great threat running the football and just a gamer at running back. I'm thinking that year with Benny Snell, some of the other guys, Ray Davis, even last year that came through there. So, Bush Hamdan was the offensive coordinator at Boise State last year, and that's exactly what he ran. We talked about Taylon Green on the Arkansas. He was his quarterback, and Ashton Gentry was just an absolute all-star in that Boise State offense led by him last year. So if they can find that personnel, I don't know. I'll confess, I don't know that I've seen Brock Vandagriff be an elite runner, but they have to figure out if they want to be a ground and pound team or a team that airs it out. Because I think with Devin Leary last year, he is a passing first quarterback and was a very solid quarterback at NC State. That's one of the reasons I was really high on Kentucky last year. And they just couldn't really decide, do we want to be that ground and pound team or do we want to let Devin Leary air it out? When they tried to let him air it out, he didn't really back that up. But they have to figure that out. They have to figure out, you're exactly right, what do they want to do on offense? And if they want to be like the best Kentucky teams of the last few years, it's going to be ground and pound, rely on the defense, and have just an elite running game, a really fun running game that's different than what some other teams are doing. So I think they'll make a bowl game. That's just what Mark Stoops does at this point. And there's no reason for him for us to expect him to take a step back. But yeah, for Kentucky to push for the top of the SEC standings, they're going to have a game breaker on the ground. And just a lot of innovation coming in from the new offensive coordinator for me.
I think if they can go to the Swamp and pull off a win against Florida, if they can beat Auburn at home, certainly if they can beat Louisville in the rivalry game to end the season. Right now I've got them at 7-5, but you get a couple
straight against Florida. They've won 3 straight against them.
Yeah, they have. So you get them in those low-scoring defensive battles. Maybe force a key turnover late, you can squint your way to 9 wins for Kentucky this year. And the funny thing is, I don't think anybody would be all that surprised, right? Like Mark Stoops just quietly wins 7, 8, 9 games. Even if he just makes a bowl game, it feels like that Kentucky fan base is pretty content, fairly happy. I think their expectations are growing, and deservedly so. They've had some success in recent years, but he's got everything he needs as far as resources, and they just plod along. They're not, I don't know, I want to say they're the bellwether in a conference with Alabama and Georgia, but you can almost set your watch to Kentucky winning 7, 8 games a season right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And that there's something to be said when you look at the lack of consistency. Obviously, everyone wants to win a national championship and push for championships, but there's something to be said for that consistency. And especially at a place like Kentucky that historically that has not happened.
Totally agree. Let us know where you have Kentucky, where you have any of these teams finishing in the SEC. Again, this list put together by our subscribers in the Power Rankings survey. That's teams 16 through 11, episode 2 in this series. Part 2 will be 10 through 6. And then finally on Friday, we will have teams 5 through the top team in the SEC. For Trey Reeves, I'm Mitch Mason. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. Until Wednesday morning, so long, everybody.
Gracious, how about